Disparities in prison systems, specifically in the US. This topic covers the harsh and inhumane living conditions that inmates and prisoners go through every day. This varies anywhere in the United States from racial disparities to health conditions. One of the biggest issues is the overcrowding and the systems of the prisons. In the US, there are currently 18 states with overcrowded prisons. This shows that the prisoners do not have the privacy they deserve. The systems of the prisons are also important and determine the time the inmate has to serve, what the inmate does after prison, and how sanitary the prison is. For example, Sweden has some of the most exemplary prisons in the world and works off of the rehabilitative system. The US does not work on the rehabilitative system as it is more expensive. This issue first started in 1972 when the prison system's population started to rise dramatically. In 1972, the prison system population rose 60%. In 1980, the prison systems had now doubled and was still on the rise. When the population had started to rise, the sanitation and inhumane conditions started to get worse and worse. By the 1990s, the prison systems had now populated 4 times as much as in 1972. In 1972, there were around 200,000 listed prisoners, and by 2014, there were 1.55 million people listed. This resulted in overpopulation, unsanitary conditions, no privacy, and fights between the prisoners. For example, some of the fights resulted in lack of bones, and if you're lucky, just some bruising. This issue has not come to a stop yet for several reasons, such as lack of funding, lack of wanting, and the lack of recognition. The United States has one of the biggest economies in the world, if not the biggest. Although they have this to their advantage, they do not care enough for this issue and don't spend their money. The first side examines the options and solutions that there are to this problem. Some examples of people that would want this issue to be faced are the prisoners and some people of the public. As I said before, there are 18 states operating with overcrowded prisons, and this is not acceptable. This leads to unsanitary, inhumane, and racial disparities in prison systems. This side thinks that the US should invest in this problem as it has the economy to do so. The only thing that the side lacks is the population to fix this problem, and the first attention that they need to get is Donald Trump or the next president. The first argument that this side would like to put up is let the prisoners lower their sentence for doing good things while in prisons. This argument would prevent all of the fights while in prisons and let the prisoners do good out of their own interest. This solution would be optional for the prisoners and they would be able to choose if they did good things. If we did this, depending on what the prisoner does, their sentence could lower 1 or 2 days. If they did something small like hold the door for everybody, then their sentence would drop only 1 hour. If the prisoners did something big, for example, help a security guard, their sentence could lower by a day. If prisoners choose not to do this, then their sentences would not change at all. If the prisoners did something bad like fight or argue with the guards or prisoners, their sentence could get raised anywhere from an hour to 20 days depending on the severity of the fights or arguments. If they were to smuggle something into the prisons, their sentence would be raised by 40 days to a year depending on what they would be smuggling. This solution wouldn't be taking out any laws as it would just be adding one. This solution also does not oppose any laws, therefore, this solution is helpful and will guide the inmates on a path that would set them up for a better life after prison. The second argument that this side would like to put up is the prisons should be changed to rehabilitative systems as we have the economy to do so. This solution suggests that the prison system should be changed since the current ones aren't working. The rehabilitative system would ensure that the prisoners would change for the better and get a better direction for the future doing so. The rehabilitative system has not been introduced to prisons, although if they did, then that would be much better for the that would be much better than the punitive system that is used right now. This solution has been used by the Swedish prison systems for a while now, and their prison systems have not had any issues. Their prisons are exemplary, and the US needs to take an example from them. The 18 states running with overcrowded prisons can use these solutions to make the inmates better people so that they don't come back with a worse crime and have better health conditions and more privacy and more humane living conditions, as these people are humans and they also deserve human rights. The second side believes that the prison systems work fine and they do not need improvement. This side believes that the prisons are fine because they have been running fine for a while now. This side would strongly believe that prisons should not change as they are working fine and we do not see any bad effects on the public. The US should spend their money on something other than this problem, as we think this would be a dead end. The US has a prison system that works right now, and they shouldn't change it because if they do, it may not work. Studies show that most rehabilitative systems, most of the time, do not work. This side is saying because this is the only way that prisons can truly change. But will they change for the better? We do not think so. This side thinks that the punitive system helps further correct the prisoners by giving them a fear to go to prison. This side would also like to bring up the fact that the punitive system is more cost effective. That brings this side to the next point. We shouldn't spend our money on this as there are many other things that the US could focus on. The US should not be spending their money on something that improves the healthcare of prisons as its healthcare already has a problem in general. The healthcare in the US is so bad for several reasons. The lack of insurance coverage is one of them. There are more than 27 million people that didn't have insurance. The population of the US is 327.3 million. This shows that about a twelfth of the population doesn't have insurance. Another reason that the healthcare is so bad is because there is underperforming primary care. You may ask, what is primary care? Primary care is the initial point of contact between the patient and the healthcare system that provides individuals access to the information and resources they need for optimal health outcomes. This was according to Yolanda Smith. Now this side has put up some points about the general healthcare and why we should not change the prison systems. What I think. I believe that this issue should be solved, as there are 18 states working with overcrowded prisons, and this leads to inhumane, unsanitary, and lack of privacy. The US is one of the biggest countries today in terms of GDP and population. The US is one of the only countries that could fix this issue within their country, and it is crazy to think that they haven't been taking advantage of this. For example, Argentina and most of South America also deals with the same problem, and all of them want to fix it, but don't have the economy to do so. Even though I would want this issue to be fixed, there are always two sides to a problem. In this case, the other side of the problem put up some valid and important points about this issue. The healthcare of the US isn't good, and we can all see this. This obviously shows that the disparities in prison systems are not a huge issue compared to this. I also think that a good point that was put up by the second side was the fact that rehabilitative systems don't always work. And this is a risk that the first side will be taking. I like this argument as it puts up a rebuttal that the first side was putting up. Though this side puts up a good point, the other side does too, such as let the prisoners or inmates lower their sentences for doing good while in the prisons. I think that this is a great idea. If the prisoners lower their sentence and rehabilitate themselves, then there would be less overcrowding and this would also be cost effective. With less overcrowding, the US wouldn't have to focus on making their prisons bigger. Instead of this, they could be focusing on the healthcare of the US and more specifically the prison system's healthcare. I'm supportive of fixing the issue, although I'm still open to arguments and suggestions by both sides. The US obviously has a lot of things going on for them and a lot that isn't um, that isn't. Although they have to start somewhere, and I think that this is a great place to start fixing their problems, aside to just waving them off and saying we'll do that later. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope everybody has a good day.